Rice rained into her collar and boots as she shifted in the crate, each grain a tiny humiliation. She slid the lid off to the side and peeked out. Alone. Her eyes darted about. The galley was dark and quiet. A stainless steel table sat in the center of the room, while a rack above gently swayed with an assortment of pots, pans, and cooking utensils dangling from little hooks. Along the wall, she could see a large cast-iron blacktop stove. That would be perfect for cooking up some flapjacks. Her mouth watered. She took hold of the sides of the crate and pulled her body up, allowing her feet to get under her so she could stand. Brushing the worst of it from her clothes, she knew it would follow her all the way into space. As her utility boots tapped against the polished tile floor, grains of rice stuck to the soles of her feet. Ugh, this stuff is everywhere. She stopped cold in her tracks. A drone sat in the corner, its mechanical eyes off and unresponsive. Atop the drone's head sat a floppy chef's hat. On its face, someone had painted a comical, swirly, Italian-style mustache. Aurora stifled a giggle at the sight. She made her way toward the hatchway from the galley, but froze as distant footsteps echoed down the corridor. Aurora slipped sideways into a narrow service alcove and held her breath as a cleaning drone hummed past the doorway, its scanner light sweeping inches from her boots. As she released her breath, a soft meow brushed against her leg. Aurora froze, then looked down. A small, fluffy Siamese kitten, its fur resembling charred marshmallows, weaved playfully between her legs. "Hey there, little furball," she whispered, bending down to scratch his ears. "How'd you get on board, huh?" The kitten purred, arching his back into her touch. "Oh, no, you don't," Pulse protested. "Don't touch that mangy rat. You know I'm allergic." His voice broke as a mechanical "Achoo!" bounced around her brain. She stifled a giggle. "You're a computer program?" she chastised. "How can you be allergic to a cat?" "Well, someone must have programmed me to be allergic to rats," Pulse muttered, his words dripping with sarcasm. Aurora chuckled. "Good thing he's not a rat, then." There was a small engraved tag on the kitten's collar. "Isn't that right, D'Artagnan?" The kitten meowed as he played with Aurора's bootstrings. Behind her, a hunk of salami sat on the stainless steel table. She cut D'Artagnan off a slab and sat it down in front of him. The kitten began to sniff the salty meat, then licked its surface. D'Artagnan's eyes went wide, a sheen drool forming on his maw as he bit into the salami. A strange warmth permeated her chest, a brief connection in an unfamiliar place. "I'm a stowaway here," she reminded herself. She gently patted the kitten on his head. "All right, little guy, stay safe in here." She made her way to the hatch. The choice for a place to hide wasn't that difficult to make. Pulse had plotted the paths of the 5 crew members from the past few months on a map overlay on her AR. 5 crew members, she thought. The Aurora can handle a complement of 50 crew, not including room for passengers. Talk about a skeleton crew. The stateroom she had chosen for herself was small, but not cramped. It was certainly more comfortable than her shanty back in the dredges, complete with a kitchenette, a tiny shower room, and a table and chair that slid out from the side of the bulkhead. It was tucked away near the engine room on the lower deck. She pulled Milo's drawing from her jacket and pressed it flat against the cabin wall. The Aurora was drawn in crooked stars, 2 stick figures beneath it, one too small to be anything but Milo. She smoothed it into place like a promise she wasn't sure she deserved to keep. "Milo would have loved this ship," she whispered. "And Tess, Jax." Her chest tightened. "I left you behind to save myself." Rice poured out of her clothes as she stretched across the soft yet firm surface of her bed, her shoulder-length blonde hair fanning out over the gray wool fabric of the blanket beneath her. Her eyes widened as she tried to capture the scene from out her porthole window. The view was spectacular. To the aft, she could see the structure of the spaceport, stretching off for a mile as its hull curved in the distance. She peeled her gaze from the view of deep space that stretched out before her to pull stray rice grains off that had stuck to her skin. My sweat must have softened the grains a bit while I was in that shipping crate. She stifled a chuckle. The mental image of her curled up, half buried in that shipping crate of rice was comical in retrospect. Even though it had been an uncomfortable disaster, she couldn't help but find the humor in it now. Pulse let out a low hum of a chuckle. "You'll be picking rice out of every crack for weeks, kid." Aurora blew a strand of violet hair out of her eyes. "I know, but I couldn't just walk on board, not with that security guard at the front gate." Pulse buzzed in agreement. She paused from picking rice off her forearm and looked back out the porthole. Why would the captain hire an Imperial as a security guard? That was what those maroon fatigues are from, right? She returned to picking rice from her skin. He hummed. But didn't you see how those fatigues lacked any patches? It was almost like they'd been torn off for some reason. I wonder why. Once an Imperial, always an Imperial. Alara's mind drifted to the man's cybernetic arms and legs. State-of-the-art, military issue. She touched her own scrap of a cybernetic arm. Grains of rice still stuck in the spinning gears. They don't just hand those out to anyone, only to their elite soldiers. The clock in her AR had reached 0, and she heard the ship's power grid switch to the fusion generator. The low-pitched rumbling hum was unmistakable. "Release all docking clamps." A commanding yet soft feminine voice burst from the wall-mounted intercom. A high-pitched whine spun in the distance, and the spaceport began to drift slowly away. The unmistakable crackling of plasma echoed from the engine room as the impulse drive burst to life, and with a lurch, the spaceport drifted away faster. A young man's voice cut in on the intercom. "Navigation reporting, plot locked in and calculating, 5 minutes for jump." Her gaze returned to the porthole. She remembered hearing that the ship was short an engineer. She sighed. Hope the ship doesn't get into anything that the engineering drone can't handle. A ship this size would never sail without a human engineer. Drones follow rules. Engineers break them when rules fail. Pulse buzzed. "Those dopey guys can't tell the difference between a turbo coil from a multi-stage cooling line." Aurora giggled. "I know. If anything bad happens in the engine room, we're slag." "Well, not exactly. I could always fix it." She turned her head to the side to glance at the door to her stateroom. "But then I'd have to come out of hiding. And then what? Dumped through an airlock? Shipped straight back to the dredges in cuffs?" She frowned. Alara's mind drifted to the time she had spent with her mother, when they had pretended to play starship captain in the living room. The couch was designated as the bridge. Aurora had always wanted to play engineer, and she would hide her father's tools under the sofa cushions. She giggled as she remembered how her father had always come in from his workshop wondering where one tool or another had gone. Her fingers traced through the fabric of her t-shirt along the shape of the locket. "They'd have loved to be here among the stars with me," she sighed. "Who?" Pulse let out a disinterested huff. Aurora rolled her eyes. "My folks, duh." She stuck her tongue out. Then her countenance softened. "I remember how we used to sit out behind the house on the ground and stare up at the dredge's sky." She touched her cybernetic arm. "Mom would always describe the stars to me. They felt so real." Her eyes drifted to the porthole. "But they never felt as real as this." She gazed out into the infinite expanse. The intercom burst back to life, interrupting Alara's daydream. The voice of flat, synthetic drone, completely devoid of inflection. It sounded like the recording of a human voice, processed until all musicality was scrubbed away, leaving only a stilted mechanical clip. Engineering drone designation F-28 reporting. Jump drive spun up, ready for calculation. The hum of the impulse engine buzzed along the bulkhead as the intercom went silent. Then the captain's voice hissed from the speaker. Acknowledged. Navigation confirm. The voice of the captain was replaced by that of the young man. Navigation confirmed. 2 minutes on the clock. There was an unfamiliar drawl in the way he pronounced his vowels. It reminded her of the old bootleg frontier-living holovids her father had watched when she was younger. Federated Colonies cadence, somewhere between order and anarchy. Her father hadn't raised her to choose sides. He'd raised her to end the war. Alara's fingers brushed against the silver chain around her neck. Instinctively, she tugged at it, pulling it free from the bib of her overalls, and dangled the silver locket over her eyes. Her father's words reverberated in her mind. "This locket contains my legacy," he had said as he placed the chain over her head. "It's up to you to unlock its secrets and use the technology you find inside to help unify the 5 factions." Unify the 5 factions? She traced the starfield engraved in the locket's surface with her finger. There's so much hatred, too much distrust. How could such a little thing unify fractured humanity? Her finger played at the clasp, allowing the front cover to swing open. Inside, a small, black, plastic-cased microchip sat embedded into the locket's backing. It was a simple package with 8 leads, 4 on either side. An N was printed on the cover of the chip, the logo familiar. Neotech, cutting-edge industrialists from the syndicate. What's inside you? She had wanted to hack into the flash chip for years now. However, she had never had the right equipment or the computing power to unlock it. Perhaps I can use some of the ship's equipment to help unlock this. The Aurora is renowned for her state-of-the-art scientific facilities, even though she's lacking in crew. The young man's voice cut in on the intercom once more. Navigation reporting, computations calculated, and ready for jump. Commencing countdown. Alara sat up and redirected her gaze out the porthole. The space station, a distant blip, could barely be seen. The young man continued. 10, 9, 8. Why are they using a manual countdown to time their jump? She wondered. Then she felt the anticipation in the words that were being broadcast through the speaker, and her breath became tight. Her chest heaved, endorphins hanging, waiting to be released. It was a natural response that had been captivating humanity for centuries. She had heard tales told by spacers and scavengers, but their stories were a pale replacement for the real thing. She soaked in every second, letting the anticipation wash over her. 3, 2, 1. The voice concluded. Immediately, the spin of the jump drive cut through all sound, and the entire ship began to shake. Alara's body skipped along the taut surface of the bed before a piercing silence penetrated the noise, and everything went still. From outside the porthole, the starfield inverted like a photo negative, the blackness replaced by a blinding white expanse, speckled with black pinpoints that radiated like stars. Time hung still for what seemed like an eternity. Alara tried to breathe, but she couldn't move. The universe was laid bare before her. Then, as it had started, the jump ended abruptly. The shaking of her bed returned, the starscape back to black. The sound of the jump drive spinning down erupted in her ears, and the air rushed out of her lungs, her body's delayed reaction to her thoughts. The clock displayed in her AR indicated that no time had passed while they were jumping through space. Finally, the shaking slowed, then ended, as the jump drive spun down to silence. "Successful jump to Sector Alpha Delta 6, the captain's voice squelched on the intercom. "Engage impulse drives and survey the sector for threats. Engineering, report." The intercom went silent. There was no reply from the engineering drone. "Engineering! Report!" The captain's voice was tight like a drum. A faint odor penetrated the vent to Alara's cabin. She sniffed. Drive oil? Her eyes fluttered to the vent. Why is it burnt? "Ignore it, kid," Pulse urged her. "Let the crew handle it." She began to tap her knee with the tip of her finger. "I know that smell." Her voice was low, her mind screaming at the anomaly, overriding Pulse's cautious hum. "The ship is in trouble. Consequences be salvaged."